dyslexic, dysgraphic, and dyscalculic with major alphabetizing issues. And they said, okay, we'll put you in the bindery department. So I went down to the basement, down this dark hallway where there's this little desk, and what my job was peeling the covers off of JAMA and the BMJ and all kinds of unusual periodicals and putting them together twine and putting title cards in. And then my sister was also a work study student, and she was much better with alphabetizing. And I said, Esther, what do they do with my books upstairs? And she says, well, they're on the shelves. I said, who checks them out? She says, not many people, but they're very pretty. And I went up and looked at them, and they were. They had these black, beautiful covers and these gold gilt letters on the edges, and they looked lovely. And I was very proud of what I was doing. And this was back in 1991. And that was the year after the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act passed. And I remember that time. It was the talk of the times. People said, oh, this is going to destroy the mom and pop businesses. They're just going to go out of business because they had to put this label on. And that how you interfere with states' rights like this. How does the federal government think that they can put this information on packages and interfere with us this way? And also, that the consumers are not educated enough to understand technical information on a box of cereal. So it shouldn't be there. This was the zeitgeist of the times that I was living in. And then 1 year later, I met this really great guy, and his name was Holliday, and he was a graduate student. And I was only a freshman, so he was cute. And we started talking about books. We both loved books. Loved them. Our first conversation was about The Stand, and we just really hit it off. And then we took a theater scenic painting course together, and we were both procrastinators, and we'd paint all night long the day before the project was due, and we would just get in each other's faces and just argue and argue and argue, and we slowly fell in love doing that. And our idea of a perfect date was we would go to a bookstore, and we'd each buy a book, and then we'd go to dinner, and we'd each read the book and not talk to each other. Bibliophiles in love. So that was our life. And for many years, I dropped out of school and supported my husband because he was a graduate student, the world of a graduate student. And I worked as a factory worker, and I worked as a waitress, and I worked in retail. And I really hit it off in retail and just dove into that world for 16 years. And I had 2 great kids, and I did art on the side. And my husband managed to get a master's degree and a PhD in film studies. And then he tried to get a job. That was challenging. He ended up adjuncting in multiple universities. In the year of 2007, 2008, my husband worked at 2 different universities in adjunct, was a part-time video store clerk. I worked full-time retail, 45 hours a week, plus I had 2 jobs as a part-time art teacher at 2 different facilities, and we had 2 kids. Between the 4 of us, only one of us was insured, me, through my full-time job. Neither my children nor my husband had insurance, because we just couldn't afford it, even though we had 6 jobs between the 2 of us. So after all these years of adjuncting and trying to get the dream job, in September 2008, he got the call. American University was going to hire my husband in a 1-year appointment between 2 departments, and we were so excited. And for the first time in our life, we had health insurance for the whole family. It was just great. And my husband went to the doctor that fall, and it turned out he had hypertension. And the doctor gave me medication for hypertension. And the year progressed. And that's my husband right there with our son, Isaac. And that painting is called The Embrace. And in January of 2009, my husband began experiencing chest pain. And went to the ER, simply ER, and they said he had a broken rib. Well, that didn't really get a broken rib. He'd been coughing a little bit. They're like, okay, you got a broken rib coughing. Thought that was sort of odd, but being he's only 38 years old at the time. But that's what they said, so okay. So we went on with that month, and then February hit. And in February, the back pain began. And it got worse and worse, and he was having trouble walking. And we kept going back to the doctor, and the doctor kept giving my husband pain medication. And then we went to March, and the pain was so bad on March 13th, we actually went to another ER, saying, he's hurting so bad. It's a Friday evening, so maybe we should have this looked at because, we can't see the doctor until Monday. And after waiting for 3 hours in the hospital and only getting an x-ray and express wound care, they sent us home. They said, we really aren't going to be able to see you for maybe 9 hours or 12 hours to actually have a doctor talk with you, so why don't you just go home and go see your regular doctor on Monday? And that following week, I tried not to be the pushy wife during all of this, But I went to the doctor with my husband the following week. And one of the first things that struck me is they weren't weighing him. I said, on your medical chart, when was the last time you weighed my husband? He's been going here for about 8 weeks at this point. The last time they weighed him was the fall, when they had actually given him the hypertension drugs. I was astounded. They said, well, we don't always weigh our patients in our practice. Then, the doctor said, I wonder if you're depressed. And that could be the reason why you're having so much back pain. And I said, well, yeah, he's depressed because he's in constant pain all the time. We need to find out what's wrong with him. I'm actually worried about his kidneys. Then the doctor looked at me and said, oh, it can't be the kidneys. He's got lower back pain. I said, I want an MRI. Up until this point, we were never offered an MRI. And at this point, my husband is on 4 types of pain medication, including Oxycontin. He's now on 4 types of laxatives and 2 types of muscle relaxants, and we do not know what is wrong with him. The MRI was done, and the doctor called us up a few days later and said, we'd like to have you have an appointment with a friend of ours. He's an oncologist. And we weren't really actually sure what an oncologist was. We actually had to get on the internet to find that out. And we were a little concerned that why did back pain become an appointment to an oncologist? So we got to the hospital, and we had the appointment, and he hurt so bad they admitted him for tests because he couldn't walk around really well anymore at this point. And 2 days later, on March 27th at 11 o'clock in the morning, when my husband was by himself and I was selling toys at a toy store, the doctor came in my husband's room and began to speak verbally to my husband. And what my husband could recall him saying was, oh, Reggie, I think I have growths in my abdomen. He said something about growths in my abdomen, and maybe something about that inferior vena. I'm not quite sure. And I think there's a 3-centimeter something on my kidney. I don't know. Could you please get here as soon as you can? So I left work as fast as I could, and I got to the hospital. And it only took me 30 minutes because I got a ride from a friend. And I got through the door and I said, what's going on? What did they say? And he said, I really don't know. Could you just ask the doctor? So I went to find the doctor. He needed to go to a medical conference that day, so within minutes of leaving my husband, he left. And he left for 4 days. And during that time, he was not reachable for contact or communication. So I spent the next 4 days trying to talk to everybody I could in that facility about the state of my husband's disease. And from the little bit of information that I had managed to gather, went on the internet. And I started with Wikipedia, because that's where everybody starts. And I went from there to NIH, and I went from there to the UK, and what I was reading wasn't so good. And then 2 days later, I heard we were getting bone scans and CT scans, and we had those tests, what were the results? And nobody was telling us. Our doctor was out of town. So finally, the oncologist came by 4 days later. In the 2 minutes that she was there, I asked, he had a bone scan and CT scan, what were the results? And she just looked at us and said, you mean nobody's told you? I'm like, no, no one's told us. Oh, well,